Hi, so in this video, we're going to talk about Amazon Connect data tables. Amazon Connect data tables is one of the new features in Amazon Connect, right? It was recently released, and then it's really one of the features that will really save a lot of time. So pretty much data tables allows us to store and then manage configuration in Amazon Connect, right? So previously there were lots of things where or certain use cases where say you had holidays and then you wanted to store them somewhere. What you used to do was to pretty much store it into a DynamoDB table, and then you have a Lambda function that checks against it. Data tables kind of have a similar structure, right? That helps you to manage your configuration. But in this case, everything is managed in Connect itself. So I'll quickly jump into it and then just do a simple test with data tables. So now the first thing you do is to log in into your account, come to routing, and then you see data tables. So I'm going to easily create a table and then integrate it with a flow. This is just a quick tutorial that was requested by one of us, right? So we'll just do something simple and then you understand how this works. So in data tables, a little guide, what you do is you create your table and then you define attributes, right? It's more like a table item. So I'll add a table and say, let me do it prompt messages, right? I'm just doing this in order to fly. So the times when I want pretty much, let me do Africa Accra, and then I'll save this. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to add an attribute. So an attribute pretty much is like your columns, right? Where you kind of define your data types, whether something is a key, a primary key, or something. So the first thing I'm going to do is to add my first attribute to be say prompt. Let me do prompt name. And then the type for this, I'm going to select test. There are multiple types. Either you want a number or a test or Boolean types, right? But for primary key, I can select between these two. And then if I want to add validation, when you talk of validation, right? Say you want to set specific rules. One is the length validation, that whatever input they give should be in this range, or whatever that value should match this condition. Or I can set my own custom rules and then restrict them to specific values. So for example, if I'm dealing with the days of the weeks and stuff like that, I can have ESA Monday, and then all these things are going to be the values that are allowed for this set attribute that you are doing. For this one, I'm not going to do that, so I'll select none, and then just have my key as primary key. Click on save, and then I'll add another attribute, and that attribute I'm going to say message. Then this one, to the type is going to be test, and then let me leave this like that. So this is just my pretty much my table structure, right? My primary key is the prompt name, and then the message that it plays. So if I want to add an item, right, a record, I just come in here and then say I have a prompt name for emergency. This is just a quick tutorial that I'm doing. So this is emergency testing tables. Yeah, so this is just my table item. Oops, no, I have to acknowledge this for the first item so that it's kind of confirms that my primary key and everything can be changed. So yeah, so this is it. So now I'll quickly integrate this with a simple flow, and then we'll see how to make use of our tables and our prompts in our tables. So what I'll do is I'll come to my flows. Yeah, so I'm going to create a simple inbound flow. As usual, let me bring my login so that at least we can look at some things in the log if need be. Then the key parts is to bring our data table block. So I'll look for data table, yeah, so this is my table. As you can all see, I have this table prompt message. So I'll come to my flow. Now what I'm going to do, the action I want to perform is to read from the table, right? I'm not writing into the table, but rather I'm reading from my table And then once I read, I want to evaluate the values that is coming in from. So these are the basic actions I want to do. Correct. So what I'm going to do is to select my table, which is this. And after selecting my table, this is where the major thing is. I can then proceed to add a query, right? So I can give my query a name. For this case, I'm going to call it get prompt. So depending on your use case, you can do whatever you want to do. And then here, this is where you fetch the value coming in from your table, right? So remember, in your table, you have a lot of values, a lot of things coming in, correct? So if you have a lot of things coming in from your table, if you have a lot of table items, what you need to understand is how then do I access it? I need a key, right? Something to fetch the details I'm looking for. So in this case, if I look at my table, the prompt I want to kind of play now is my emergency prompt. So what I'll first do is to somehow get this thing as an attribute, right? So I should have an attribute in my flow which I check to be able to pass this. So what I'm going to do now is to do $attribute dot, then let me give something a name. Let me have situation, right? So inside my flow, I'll go back inside my flow to add a condition for situation. So what I'm saying is, inside my flow, I'm checking the prompt I want to fetch. The value I'm looking for will be under this situation condition. So this is going to be my query. And then once that happens, I want to get these attributes. This is the result of the query that I want to give in. Again, this prompt query name is just something that I'm going to reference later. But what matters is, what do you want to fetch from a DB table or your data table, right? That is what I'm currently doing. And I'm saying that inside our flow, there is going to be an attribute that will be stored under our situation table. If that situation attribute is emergency, what it's going to do is it's going to play this prompt to us. So now let me just click on confirm, and then inside my flow, let me quickly set a contact attribute, right? Since this is not just a complete flow, I'm just going to do some of it so that we see how the tables actually work, how it returns. So you can configure it however you want it to be. So I'm going to have the user defined attributes, situation, and then now my value is going to be emergency. Emergency, confirm. Now let me connect this to this. So I'm setting this attribute, user defined, emergency. Yeah, and then let me just do this to make this thing a bit complete. Let me check a contact attribute. That's really so not much, but I just want those of us that are new to see something a bit end to end, right? So in here, let me just check the channel. So let me do user define, and then let me do system. I just want to check the channel. I'm going to test this with chat, so I can't. So if this equals, say, chat, if this equals chat, we are setting the situation to emergency. If no match, if this equals chat, let me do display prompt, and then I'm going to use the message coming in from these two, show us. But if it's voice, let me disconnect. Yeah, I don't want this to be a very long tutorial. Guys, if you are new and then you want to understand how to build flows, all this logic, I have a complete Amazon Connect course, and then like that's on this channel. You can check it out. That will be very helpful. Let me just do this. Yeah, all right. So now I've set my conditions and all. Now to the piece that is very important. You see, in our DB table, as I said, we are returning the message, right? If you look at our query, we are returning the message attribute. How then do you access it? Just like we have for a lot of things, right? I could have easily played it in the BAM. I just want you guys to see, and then so that when you are testing, you have a proper view. Let me store this as an attribute, and then we can take a look at it in the log. What I'm going to do is to store the message. So let me do user define. Let me do message. Let me reference it as table message. That will make it better. And then now the value for this is going to come under this. The value for this is going to come under this. Dollar dot data tables dollar dot data tables dot get prompt dot message. So this is our key data table, right? This is the get prompt. The get prompt is pretty much the prompt we gave, and then the value that we are expecting to get the answer from. That's all that we're doing, right? Someone will probably be asking, Kevin, where did you get this from? When you just do this Google search and say Amazon Connect contact attribute JSON, you get a list of all those attributes, right? And then you can make use of it. So let me just quickly show you guys this. Yeah, so if I come down here and then I find data tables, so this is how you get to data table. The data tables dot the query name, right, dot the attribute you want to return. So that's why I did this in the flow. So now I've stored this under my table message. So let me just connect this to this. And then inside my play prompts, instead of message, let me do text to speech. Let me do set dynamically. And I'm going to do user defined, and then I'll put my table message here. I just don't want to type anything plenty. Let me give this thing tables demo. Let me publish if everything is correct. Yeah, so I'm quickly going to test this with a chat flow. So let me just simply come to test chat. Yeah, but you can test it with a phone call, and then you change your channel to voice, or you can simply, you don't have to even check those conditions. Yeah. So how did I call it table demo. So I'm just selecting this, and I'm going to simply test this thing. So let me see what is happening. This is emergency testing tables, right? So it is returning the value from my table. This emergency testing table. Let me see if I can edit this record. Let me add editing. Save. Now let me come to the test chat again. Editing, right? So initially, if you wanted to do this, you have to have a lambda function. You have to have a DynamoDB table. So if someone wants to edit something in a DB table, they will have to log into AWS, go to DB, and then do it. So in certain cases, what we were even doing was we are giving people UIs to kind of access all that. But now this functionality is in AWS and Connect itself. So this is pretty much Amazon Connect data tables. Yeah, so to those of us that requested that I make tutorials on this is very simple. Just keep playing on it. If you have questions, always drop it, and then I'll be glad to help and assist. Thank you so much for watching. Let's meet in the next video.